On this day, in 1953, the police licensing branch was gearing up for a surprise raid. For a couple of days, the Vice Squad had been making their presence acutely felt across the city, coming down with an iron fist on crimes of vice on the back end of a number of very unflattering expose articles printed across the pages of the Courier Mail. On the 18th of April, the Courier Mail had run with a story on the scourge of sly grog operators within the city. Taking a more sympathetic approach, the outlet reported that the police licensing branch was doing all it could in an attempt to stamp out the illegal trade, however was effectively being held back in their endeavours by outdated and frankly underwhelming support from the city's magistrates. Allegedly guilty of treating offenders with kid gloves, the magistracy were accused of handing down minimal sentences when sly grog sellers were brought before their courts, creating a system whereby fines imposed paled in comparison to the revenue generated via the illegal trade. Interviewing members of the licensing branch and pressing for statistics, the paper noted it was believed upwards of 60 to 70 sly grog operators were peddling their wares across the city's inner reaches, a startling number in comparison to the roughly 120 actual licensed premises within the same boundaries. Within days, the article having obviously hit a raw nerve, the Queensland Council of Churches President, Reverend Ronald Passion, waded headlong into the debate. Enraged that sly grog operators were being left to trade unabated on Sundays, a luxury licensed premises were in no way permitted to do in 1950s Brisbane, Reverend Passion took further aim at the magistracy and their lenient approach to crime. Strongly advocating for jail terms without option for repeat offenders, differing from the fine system regularly imposed by the courts, Reverend Passion was joined in his appeal by Reverend Rhys Thomas of the City Congregational Church, Reverend Smith of the City Baptist Tabernacle, and Reverend Nash of the Albert Street Methodist Church. Now smelling blood in the water and the perfect opportunity for a scoop, the Courier Mail pressed ahead with a follow-up expose on the 22nd of April. Shifting gear from their earlier article 4 days beforehand, the subsequent piece was rather scathing of the police licensing branch, going as far as to accuse the Vice Squad of turning a blind eye to the city's out-of-control sly grog trade, alongside associated bookmaking escapades, underground gambling houses, and unregulated prostitution. The newspaper led with the opening line that Brisbane's vice dens are an indictment on the responsible authority which allows them to continue, and the truth about vice in Brisbane is that the police department cannot be held to be that responsible authority. However, doubling down on their allegations, they took a further potshot at the Queensland government, stating the falling down in stamping out vice was also a sign of lax government policy, in the complete absence of any long-term mitigation strategy. With feathers ruffled at the highest ranks of the police licensing branch, the Vice Squad was quick to respond in the hope of proving themselves and quelling the public outcry resulting from the Courier Mail's exposés. Descending on North Quay, which at the time wasn't a particularly ambitious exercise given the branch's headquarters were located only a few hundred metres away in Roma Street, the first two arrests were made in the renewed crackdown on vice crimes. Two girls in their late teens, Annie Ellen May Harris and Gloria Millicent Redpath, were taken into custody and charged with vagrancy, with an added insinuation their mode of living depended on the generosity of men whom they'd picked up in hotel lounges. Their cases were rushed through the police court, and both young women were sentenced to 1 month's imprisonment. However, the Vice Squad realised they'd need something a little more impressive to appease the baying public. So, on the 26th of April, the Vice Squad travelled to the house of William Spence on Isaac Street in Paddington. A warrant granted on information they'd supposedly received earlier in the day that sly grog had been delivered to the address for on sale. Spence wasn't a stranger to the licensing branch and was considered a fairly easy mark. Having been charged and fined on 16 occasions over the previous 6 years for sly grog dealing, Spence had already accrued £60 in outstanding fines relating to previous raids on the 8th and 22nd of March and again on the 2nd of April. Entering the premises in what would have seemed a familiar procedure by now, the Vice Squad were rewarded with the discovery of 37 additional bottles of illegal grog, some of which had even been stored on ice in the bathroom for convenience. Hoping to use Spence's most recent case as an example to others, he was arrested and brought before the courts in the hope the book would be proverbially thrown. Yet, to the licensing branch's complete disbelief, an additional and seemingly lax fine of £20 was imposed. Despite the licensing branch prosecutors' continued protests at the leniency of the punishment, given the sly grogger's previous record, Spence's solicitor accused the Vice Squad of persecuting his client, referencing the recent embarrassing articles penned by the Courier Mail. Arguing Spence should have been given ample time in which to pay his fines, which now totalled a hefty £80, the magistrate found in favour, setting repayment at 2 months and allowing the illegal brewer to walk free. The Vice Squad's best laid plans to strike fear into the hearts of sly grog operators across Brisbane had failed. Ironically, Spence and his address at Isaac Street in Paddington would remain a familiar haunt to both good time seekers and the Vice Squad alike. Stories of his escapades continue well into 1954, with one report on the 1st of October placing Spence back before the courts on his 41st and 42nd charges of sly grog running, with an additional £60 in fines.